I am so excited to have Joy Usher here. She is my teacher at Astro Mundi School of Astrology and in the Diploma 2 program, and we have been discussing predictive techniques. And has been so gracious to come on today to discuss the charts of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and the election through the eyes of the Firdaria, which is something that I had not known anything about until I took her class. And so, why don't you tell us something about you, Joy? You've been teaching and lecturing and doing astrology for 25 years, more than that. How long have you been
Yes,
studying?
yes. I started my classes in 1995, so
Wow.
that's a long time ago. And pivoted towards, I was a student of Robert Zoller when he first started teaching the medieval course. Loved the traditional stuff, and just followed that path through that way. So so that's teaching, consulting, doing stuff like that, writing. So
Yes, and
all of it.
I have your two books here. So she's written look how big these are. So I think it's hysterical that the companion is bigger than the original.
I know. I got a bit carried away, Anne Marie. What can I
I love it.
say?
I love it. So that's perfect. So, and you're going to do another one now on Fredaria, is what
Yeah,
is.
yeah, soon. Soon to be next year. The Mooncard book should be out by then.
Okay.
So I'm going to cover some of this today because it's actually relevant to what we're talking about and the
Right.
predictive
Yeah.
stuff. So yes, I will cover that. And there's a book coming out next year, so that'll be exciting
Awesome.
for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, I'm turning it over to you. So whenever you want to start, I think
Okay.
I've given you the ability to share.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. What I'm going to
awesome.
do is I'm going to work through a PowerPoint and I'm actually going to just do a slideshow. Um, Beautiful. Okay. Right from the beginning. So I've got a nice big
Perfect.
one here. So I've just used the official photographs for these two candidates. And what I've picked up here, what I want to talk about today is Firdaria. Now, Firdaria, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is a first century Persian technique that talks about this idea of time lords, that a planet is in direct or directing the chart or directing the person for the period in which it overlays. We have years of time lords. In fact, it's quite easy to see actually in Kamala's chart here. This is the period for Venus, and it goes from the age of 49 to the age of 57. So I'm going to enlarge these in Vidarias and talk about them more as we go through. But you can see that Venus will be the major lord, what we call the major lord, for 8 years for that period of 49 to 57. But the 8 years of Venus gets divided by 7. So each of the planets, including Venus, takes a little portion of that time. So we might like to talk about the years of 8 years of Venus, but we'll talk about the months where Mercury takes over for Venus, or the moon takes over for Venus, or Saturn takes over for Venus, or Jupiter, or Mars, or the sun. So there's a particular reason for the order of these planets, which I'm going to go into today. This guy over here on the left has gone through all the planets and has restarted the process with the sun. And the sun's Firdaria has 10 years. So that will go from the age of 75 and to the age of 85. So even though the sun is the major planet in charge of the 10 years between 75 and 85, it hands over to other planets to give their own interpretation of the periods of months. So we really are looking at both of these planets. In this case, if we're looking at the fact that for Kamala, we have from Mercury, we have from the age of 57, and I haven't put all of Mercury's years in here, but from the age of 57 to the age of 70, Mercury will be the main director of her chart and her life and her experiences and everything that she goes through, 13 years for Mercury. Now, Mercury has the longest Firdaria period in years, which is 13 years. So when we divide it by 7, you're going to get almost 2 years for every planet. And that's why we want to have, first of all, it is a Venus is the first one. For Mercury's period, Mercury takes over for the first period of 22 months. And you can see here that it starts on her 57th birthday, and then almost 2 years later, in August 2023, it hands over to the moon. And then we have the moon coming in and directing or giving a view or a perspective of what Mercury would like to learn. Anne-Marie, anytime you want to stop me for a question, go for it, please.
No, and so what we can see is that Kamala's in that moon Mercury period right now. So that's where she is.
Yes. Yeah, which started in August last year and will go until July next year. So this is the one I'm going to concentrate on, is the Mercury main period, but the sublord being the moon, and the effects of the moon on the life during this period from August 2023 until July 2025, which is where the election is. The 2024 election is right smack in the middle of that. And for Donald Trump, who started his sun period in his 75th birthday, his major years of 10 years here, what we're going to have here, which just started in April this year, was that we have the major lord, which is the sun, and the Mercury, who is the most important planet for the sun, from this period of April 2024, earlier this year, and it will go until next September 2025. So even though we have dates for these beginnings, they are chunks of time. They are months, periods of time. So you're not so concerned as you might be if you're working with transits and you're saying, this is happening on this day. And what you're talking about is a period of time, of months, that you're really focused on the Firdaria.
Right.
Yeah. Look, the thing that really holds Firdaria back for people that I've spoken to is two criticisms which seem to be very counter, almost like they're two sides of the pendulum. I'll get people who will say it's far too simple, it's too easy. How can the sun be the Lord for this period and then hand over to Venus? And, this is too long. There's too much happening in this time. It's too simple. And then I'll get other people who will say, I can't use Firdaria, it's too complicated. So I'm kind of trying to sort of show through these two examples that you take a piece at a time and you break it down like a jigsaw, and you're putting one piece into a person's life which will fit and at the end of their life create this picture of who they are and the experiences these planets have taught them as they go through. So that's what I'd like to do through this. Okay.
Awesome.
So okay, I'm going to move on, and I know this has probably been done 100 times, but I wanted to start with the synastry between these two charts. Now, I've used this one for Donald Trump, which has a rising of 29 degrees Leo. It's from Astro Mundi, and they believe it's from the birth certificate. So these are very late degree here of an ascendant, of Leo ascendant, which means that the sun is going to be the ruler of the ascendant. And here's the sun up here in Gemini at 22 degrees of Gemini. So we have an ascendant at 29 degrees of Leo, ruled by the sun at 22 degrees of Gemini. So you've got a nice trine. It's a wide trine, but it's a trine between the ruler and the ascendant. And I always feel quite happy to use this chart. I think it's a very valid chart for Donald Trump. For Kamala Harris, we have an ascendant of 24 degrees. Again, it's of a birth certificate. Astro Mundi has given it a AA rating, so I'm pretty happy with both of these charts. The north, as you can see, the north node is exactly same degree on Harris's ascendant, and the south node is on her descendant. Now, the dots are to show you the synastry between them. So if I start with, say, his descendant, this one here, the descendant for Donald Trump is 29 degrees of Aquarius. This is Kamala's Saturn at 28 degrees of Aquarius. Wow. So virtually her Saturn is on his descendant, which is a really interesting thing of kind of going, I'm calling you to be accountable. I'm right on your tail. I'm going to take your power away. I'm going to take your I'm going to take this from you, and I am the enemy. That's Saturn on that descendant. That's how I would read it. The other thing is there's some really interesting kind of correlations in this Now, both of them have a sun-moon opposition, which I think is really interesting. They're both full moon people. So we have the sun for Kamala at 27 degrees of Libra and the moon at 27 degrees of Aries in the opposition. For Donald Trump, we've got the sun at 22 degrees of Gemini and the opposition to the moon at 21 degrees of Sagittarius, and they're on the nodal axis. So, interesting that they're both full moons, interesting that the sun opposes the moon and what that means for them. Just that observation of, the different signs, they're ruled by different planets, but just that sun-moon opposition I thought was really interesting. What is kind of connecting them, though, is the fact that their nodal axis is only 4 degrees from each other. So if you can see, and the moon, here at 21 degrees of Sag, is on that descendant and on the south node for 21 degrees of Sag. Now, there's a lot of years between these two, and the cycle of a nodal axis is 18 years. So to find, them between not even reversed nodal axis, but the same nodal axis within 4 degrees. When one's just turned 60 and the other is 78, I suppose that's the 18-degree difference. You think about it and you go, okay, Kamala's 60, Trump is 78, there's your 18 degrees nodal axis. So they are, to me, that nodal axis is about being linked in as being absolutely critical to each other's lives in that kind of karmic sense of karmic battle, if you like. They're locked into battle. And of course, what you have with Donald Trump is that his moon is also on this south node. So that aligns his moon to her south node, and his sun is on the north node, which kind of aligns it to her north node. So
and her ascendant.
It's like, this is a karmic battle. These two were meant to come together in battle.
Yes.
And it didn't look like it until the end of July this year. And again, the rider I should give you is that I'm observing it from another country's perspective. I'm not American, I'm Australian. I'm going to make mistakes about your system, so please, allow me those mistakes and forgive me. I'm a true observer. I can't vote in your elections. It's just, sitting back there watching this drama unfold and astrologically watching this drama unfold that fascinates me. So sorry, forgive my mistakes and forgive, the gaffes I make about your system. And as I said, we have a different system here. And of course, the biggest difference between your system and ours is we don't have a choice. We have to vote. We are legally bound to vote.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and we are fined if we do not. At the age of 18, you've got 6 months to register to vote, and you're fined if you don't. And if you don't turn up on election day or send in your postal vote or do an absentee vote, you will be heavily fined. So,
well, that is fascinating because that just makes me think that's more voter suppression over here. Is like, oh no, we don't want them to vote because the Republicans know that they would never win. If everybody voted, they would never have office.
So it's really interesting to hear people registering to vote at the most incredible ages, like sort of in their, people in their 80s and 50s and, whatever it is. When we kind of go, well, that's on your list of your 18th birthday, you must register, So,
wow.
it's an interesting kind of different concept. Sorry, so I digress. But the other thing that I wanted to show you, of course, is that we have Kamala's sun and moon, which is T-square. Now, here is her sun and moon at 27 of Libra to 27 of Aries. Here's her moon, which is bracketed here at 27 of Aries. Here's her sun bracketed at 27 degrees of Libra. And it forms a T-square to this Saturn-Venus.
Wow.
Now, okay, you've got a few degrees, but the Venus is 25 and the sun and moon are 27. So it's close enough to be notable. Now,
absolutely.
Sorry, Marie, I'm going to stop. Sorry.
No, I just said absolutely. Yes. Noted. Yeah.
The reason that I'm really interested in the Saturn and the Venus in Donald Trump's chart is that it's the conjunction of his descendant, the descendant ruler, I should say. So Saturn rules Aquarius, the seventh house, and Venus rules his midheaven. So it's almost that sense of, with the help of other people, and they are critical other people, whether they're financiers, whether they are Elon Musk, whether they are, large beneficiaries, who will fund him. That is the conjunction of the descendant lord and the MC. So that can get you through. And I think that's what got him through on the 2016 election. That whole sense of, even to the point of rallying people to vote for him to gain what he wanted, which is the midheaven lord being fulfilled. You'll notice that the Saturn is in detriment, but they're very close degrees at this point here. But also remember that the seventh house is my opponents and my open enemies. Right. So as much as you can gain from that Saturn, it can also frustrate your ambitions for this midheaven at the same time. So I thought that was an interesting thing. And the last thing in this synastry, before I move on to Firdaria, is the fact that their Marses are within 5 degrees of each other. And that just blows my mind, which we will get into and we'll talk a lot more about through this session. So we've got Kamala's Mars, which is 21 degrees of Leo, sitting in her 3rd house. And we have Donald Trump's Mars at 26 degrees of Leo, sitting right on that ascendant of 29. So Mars is rising at the time of this birth at 26 degrees of Leo. So that is a huge connection when you're going to progress into what we're doing today, that Mars being in conjunction there. So, yeah. Any questions before I move on to individual charts?
No, we can go ahead. That's great.
Beautiful. Okay, yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Right. Okay, we're going to start with ladies first. We're going to start with Kamala Harris. Now, she has a nocturnal chart. Okay. The idea of being, whether you're diurnal or nocturnal, is this division of the horizon here. So if the sun is above the horizon, you're born during the day. If it's below the horizon, you're born during the night. Okay. Now, the biggest difference between whether you're a diurnal birth or you're a nocturnal birth is that if you're born during the day, then your sun is your main luminary. And the sun as a main luminary for people born during the day is this idea of reputation, success, acknowledgement, praise, rising in status, being honoured, having all these sort of qualities promoted as a diurnal person, because the sun is full of light, it's full of warmth, it's visible even in winter. We kind of know where it is, and we have this idea that in the daylight we have this increased sight and increased energy. That's the sort of thing of being diurnal birth. So that is what happens there. Now, this person is born during the night. So the sun is below the horizon. And even though we mark it into our charts for astrology, we have to remember there is no light at night. There is no sun at night. It's on the other side, on the other side of the world. The world is turning in such a way that the sun has been removed from them. So your prime luminary is your moon. So for someone who's born during the nighttime, as this person is, then the drive is not about the solar principle, as in recognition, success, dominance, whatever that sort of thing is. It's actually about the moon. And what the moon represents is the idea of the body, and the idea of the protection of the body, and the idea of actually understanding that the environment is critical for this person to survive. So you're not looking for praise, you're looking for safety, security, lack of harm. All these sorts of principles are part of a nocturnal person's psyche. We kind of have lost sight of this division. It's called planetary sect, and sect means to cut away, to divide, to separate. And so this idea of separating from night and day was really instilled in all the traditional texts. There was this idea that if you're born during the day, then you would yearn for this. If you're born during the night, you would yearn for something completely different. And there's something else about the moon that's very, very important, is that it's reflected light of the sun. It has no light source of its own. So what you get with a nocturnal person is they become reflective of another person. And by that I mean that service is a huge statement for a nocturnal person. To serve something larger than themselves is a sense of reflection. In other words, if you are safe, if you are comfortable, if you're okay, then I'm okay. And that's the principle of a nocturnal person. We divide immediately at birth. And if I'm consulting with someone that knows nothing about astrology, the very first conversation is between day and night. Are you born in the day? Are you born in the nighttime? And this is part of this. So this is reinforced in the Firdaria system. You're going to start this system. This is known as the Chaldean order. And the Chaldean order starts with the slowest planet at the top. This is the heavens up here. This little symbol of a headless man is what they used for the fixed stars. And they sort of saw the constellation like a great big bowl and all the stars attached to the top of the bowl. And then you have the moving planets underneath the bowl, and that's why we have these planets that run in this order. So Saturn is the one closest to the outreach. It is known as the seventh heaven. It is cold. It is remote. It is divine, or the most divine of all of these planets. And while we sort of see it as a planet of a bit of restriction and drudgery and this kind of sense of hardship, to the ancients, Saturn was revered hugely because it was the idea of the soul descending from this fixed heaven and then coming down through to Earth, which is the last one in the center here. So the Saturn is the slowest, then we have Jupiter, then we have Mars, then we have the Sun, then we have Venus, then we have Mercury and the Moon. Now, alongside of these is the number of years that each planet will rule. So the moon takes 9 years, so from birth to 9 years. Then it hands over because it's the last one. It's almost like going up to the top and starting down again. So after the moon's period of 9 years is finished, you go up to Saturn and work through the planets to Jupiter, to Mars, to Sun, to Venus, to Mercury. And these are the 7 periods of Firdaria. So these are your time lords. In fact, Al-Biruni uses the term chronocrators. And I think there's that lovely Doctor Who feeling about chronocrators, kind of thing. But chronocrators literally means time lords. These are the time lords of your life. So you're looking at these periods and you're aware that you're going to hand over to Saturn and then to Jupiter, then to Mars, then to Sun, and then to Venus and Mercury. So the one that we're going to really concentrate on for Kamala Harris is going to be the Mercury one, which was the 7th period that began when she was 57, 3 years ago, and will go through and continue till she's 70. So if I was talking about this chart next to me, we would start and we would talk about the 9 years of moon. And everything the moon signifies in the chart, we would look at its house placement, we would look at its sign, we would look at the planet that disposits it, which is Mars, because it's in Aries. We would look at the rulership of the moon, so we'd find Cancer in the chart. Where is it? On the second house cusp. Every aspect the moon has, the aspect to the sun opposite it, even the trine to the Mars, its dispositor, we would look at, and we would dissect what this 9 years would be about for the period of years. And then we would move on to Saturn and do exactly the same thing. Look at its rulership, look at its position, look at its aspects. All those sorts of things get looked at as you go through. And then we would look at Jupiter. for the periods from 20 to 32. We would move to Mars from the period of 32, beg your pardon, to 39. Then we would go to the Sun and look at that period, everything to do with the Sun. So we're looking at this Time Lords in a generic level, but it becomes personal because every chart will be different. Every statement for these planets will be different. Every position, every house rulership will be different. So it is a combination of both, this is your plan, how do you put it into effect through your chart and do it that way. Any questions about the Firdaria for nocturnal?
Not yet, no.
Okay, happy for me to move on?
Yes, ma'am.
We'll go deeper into the forest. Okay, right. On the left-hand side is Kamala Harris's Placidus chart, which is a quadrant chart. Quadrant chart means that we have the ascendant-descendant forming the horizon here at 24 degrees of Gemini. We have the degree of the midheaven. Here. Over here at 2 degrees of Pisces, the beginning of the 10th house. And even though this angle is very wide, we still have the mutable signs of Gemini to Pisces, and on the other side we have Sagittarius coming down to Virgo. So it's a mutable cross of matter here, which means that there's no signs intercepted, and each of the planets will take one sign apiece to it, even though it looks like it's a little bit wacky and a little bit off to the side. So I will use a quadrant house. I like Placidus. Some people use Alcobius, some use Cot, some use Regiomontanus. You know, there's so many quadrant housing systems. But I'll also throw in the whole sign chart, because I really like to know where everything moves according to starting the chart with the sign of the ascendant and placing 0 degrees on each of the house cusps and containing the planets within their sign in whole sign. So I'll use both of these probably, well, I will use both of these when I look at the Firdaria. There's not much movement for Vice President Harris in her charts, okay? So the moon stays in the 11th house, Jupiter stays in the 12th house. The only thing, Mars stays in the 3rd. This little stellium here stays in the 4th house. The only thing that really moves is Mercury. In the Placidus chart, 1 degree of Scorpio is in the 5th house because the cusp is 15. And in the 6th house, or the whole sign chart, it moves into Virgo, which is the 6th house. So this is going to be critical to what we're doing today, this movement from 5th house to 6th house for this planet here. Everything else pretty much stays the same, though. Saturn stays in the 9th. It conjuncts the midheaven. You can see the midheaven is 2 degrees as a point here in the whole sign chart, and the ascendant is down here at 24 degrees of Gemini here. Whole sign chart will not change the sect. It will not change anything except the way sometimes you change houses for planets and you change rulerships. So that's the 2 charts there that I'm going to use and concentrate on. Happy with that?
Happy with that.
Keep going. Okay. By now, probably half of you have tuned out because, like, oh, this is too hard. It's not hard. Seriously.
It's fascinating.
Okay. Okay. So here we have the entire life from the moon beginning at the birthday at the 20th of October 1964 down to the second column, which is age 91. If you cut and paste this I use Solarfire, my charts are Solarfire. If you cut and paste your Firdaria onto a page, it gives you a third column, which takes you to 120 years, which I think is very ambitious for Firdaria. So.
Well, that brings up a question, though, that I do have is, would you ever use Firdaria for like the Sibley chart for the United States? Could you ever apply Firdaria to the United States and see if that implies somehow?
That's a great question. I haven't done it. I guess absolutely when you've got all this longevity, in fact, you could then, plot by hand. It would
you could figure it out. Yeah. But I didn't know if it would still apply for that long.
Look, honestly, charts go on beyond,
Right.
even when people pass away, I've seen Fidari's work when your body and soul are gone, Anne Marie,
Yeah,
when the
chart's
person
still alive.
particularly,
It goes on living
yeah,
even if you're gone. Yeah.
absolutely. In the family traditions or in famous charts or whatever, you
Mhm.
find the person popping up again. And I'll sometimes go to the Firdaria and go, oh, okay, it's that one. So,
Wow.
I haven't used countries. I'm not particularly tuned to mundane. I love watching other people do mundane astrology, but it's not really something that I work with. I usually work just with the natal. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I can't see why not.
Okay.
If Time Lords work for people, I can't see why Time Lords can't work for countries as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Something to
yeah,
look up then. Okay.
yeah. I think it's
All
worth
right.
a
Sorry, go
try.
on.
Absolutely. No, 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 no. No. This is good. So, okay, I've got two periods. Look, this one has passed. The Venus one has passed. It started at the age of 49 and goes to the age of 57. And I just want to the reason I blanked it in or I coloured it in was I want people to be aware that Venus will go until the beginning of the next one, which is Mercury. So the overlap is the idea that Venus goes from the age of 49 to the birthday of 57. So you will still, and at the birthday of 57, Mercury will kick in. So it's very hard to show this on these tables. It's almost like, if I had the ability to redesign it, I would put Mercury in twice, as in the sense of Venus finishes at the age of 57 and Mercury begins at the age of 57. So I just have kind of overlapped those so that if you're looking at a person's last period in their Firdaria, it will go until the beginning of the next. So in this case, if we were looking at Kamala's Venus Firdaria or Venus Sun Firdaria, we'd be looking at from the end of August 2020 until her 57th birthday
Gotcha.
on the 20th of October 2021.
Right.
And that on that birthday, Mercury kicks in, and even though it lists only one Mercury, it is a double Mercury. You'll see in all of these, it doesn't list the second planet because it's assumed that that for the first period of every one of these long periods, the first planet, the one who's the major one, will take over the period from the first one. So this is really a Mercury period from 20th of October 2021 until the moon takes over from Mercury in August 2023. So we have those two working together. Okay.
Got it.
When you're working with two planets, as in this sense of it's almost like an overlord. You're looking at the years one as the overlord. It almost that sense of I am Mercury. I want to absorb everything mercurial. So I will represent across this period of time, this 13 years, I will represent information, communication, intelligence, marketing, siblings. Also, Mercury covers fine motor skills and gross motor skills. So, any one of these that can come and crop up during the longer period of Mercury over this 13 years. But when you have these others coming in, and sometimes they're called minor lords, and the term's really confusing because when Moon comes in, Moon becomes the dominant player for Mercury. Moon interprets what it's going to do and then gives to Mercury. So all the activity is based around the minor lords and what the minor lords gain or what they act or what they start or what they finish, they then hand to Mercury. So there's this kind of a assimilation there between them, a sense of we have, the big boss, but then we have the person who enacts those, and each of them will enact it slightly differently. The moon can only be the moon. Saturn can only be the Saturn, Jupiter can only be Jupiter. So, they're limited by their own capabilities and their own natures and their own essence. So that's really something to remember here. So, okay, this is what we would look at. But before we start looking at it, I'm going to go one more step. We will break this down, but if you can be patient with me, I want to go diverge from there and talk about something different. Okay.
I love this. Yes.
As everyone's going, what the heck is this? Okay.
This is my favorite.
I'm glad it's your favorite because it's my favorite too. Okay.
Oh, good.
Okay. Look, Al-Biruni is a 13th century astrologer. This guy here, now, some of us will recognize this book here called The Book of Instruction and the Elements of the Art of Astrology, a nice short title by Al-Biruni. Now, he is a 12th century astrologer who is just a polymath, who is a traveler, who's a scientist, who's an astrologer, who's an astronomer. He's known as the scholar of 1,000 years, with so much wisdom. Absolutely fantastic Iranian birth, but moves around all over the place and writes a book on India, kind of converts to the Indian religion, absolutely fascinating. There are so many books by Al-Biruni, not just on astrology, but on all over the fields of intelligence and education and amazing subjects. But yeah, and there is a little book here which was brought out in 2006. The first part of this Luzak edition that was in 1934 is all astronomy, and the second half is astrology. So what's happened here is editor David Roll from the Astrology Center of America has just taken the second part of this book here and published the astrology. Different font, but the tables, it is identical to the astrology that's in Al-Biruni here. Also, if you don't have these books, I've put the website at the bottom that you can find the book in this view on this archive website. So you can look at this up. Okay. Now, why does this matter? This principle is all about the idea of sect. And if we're going to talk about Firdaria, then we must address this idea of sect, because this division between day and night, between people born during the day or people born during the night, is absolutely critical, because if you're a daytime birth, the first 10 years of your life are ruled by the sun. It reinforces solar principle. If you're a nighttime birth, the first 9 years of your life are ruled by the moon. So in those 9 years, you have to, you have to learn about who is going to tend to you, who will nurture you, who is safe, what environment can you put your body into, how do you feed it, how do you comfort it, all the people who surround you who will reinforce nocturnal principle. So this is critical to divide up charts. So we need to kind of be aware that the sun has other planets which will come in to assist it. Excuse me, Anne-Marie, sorry.
All good.
Right, okay. I started by saying that if the sun's above the horizon, we pretty much know where the sun will be every single day. The sun remains around golden orb, whether there's clouds over it, whether it's rain, whatever it is. But we know from the time from sunrise to sunset where we are as far as the times. We know roughly 10 a.m., we know noon, we know 2 p.m., we know 4 p.m., we know sunset. So there's this inbuilt timing device within a diurnal person which tells them how they should be timing their successes. What am I doing today? How does that move me forward? What am I doing this week? What's my program like? What am I doing next month? What would I like to achieve by the end of the year? This is a timing device. The sun times our seasons. The sun times our days. So, of course, it's a timing device. So, something completely lacking with a nocturnal person. But for a diurnal person, you've got two planets to help you. You literally have the Lord of Time, Saturn, helping you. The one that says, this is the time, this is your age, this is what you should be doing, these are your boundaries, all the sorts of things that Saturn will do to help the sun. Jupiter also benefits the sun because Jupiter is the great wish of success, ambition, wealth, all the worldly things that Jupiter wants to use. It rules professions, the health profession, the law profession, doctors, lawyers, they're elevated members of society. Those are the things Jupiter rules. And if you're an elevated member of society, then usually you're rewarded by wealth. So it brings all good things to the sun, and it also gives the idea of pushing the sun to say, I can achieve anything. Nothing is impossible. I just need to take certain risks. I need to push my boundaries forward. I need to get mentors to help me. I need to get backing, all those sorts of things that Jupiter will help the sun with. And the Saturn comes behind the Jupiter and goes, yes, but how long will that take? What is realistic? What do you really think you can achieve, Jupiter? So between the two of them, it's like sitting on the sun's shoulders and going, Jupiter going, you can go for it, you can go for it. And Saturn going, oh, I don't know, but how are we going to achieve it? So the two of them are there to benefit the sun. And the other one that rises, so these are the little stars here. Saturn is diurnal. Jupiter is diurnal. The sun is the main luminary for diurnal. Now, Mercury is going to have both stars because you can see that I've put the yellow star for diurnal Mercury and the blue star for nocturnal Mercury. If Mercury rises ahead of the sun, it is called diurnal Mercury. And diurnal Mercury is intrinsically different from nocturnal Mercury. They are two different mindsets. If I have a diurnal Mercury, it doesn't matter whether I've got a day chart or a night chart, but if my Mercury rises before the sun, see if I put the sun here, this Mercury, say the sun was in Leo, Mercury in Gemini would be ahead of the sun. So this would be, I know it's a bit far away, but it is possible in late degrees of Gemini and early degrees of Leo, we could actually get a connection there. But it's more a visual kind of thing. So the sun rising ahead of the, Mercury rising ahead of the sun is going to be a networker. It's going to be a marketer. It's going to be, what are your connections? What do you need? What qualifications? What do you need? What sort of Saturnian qualifications do you need? Mercury, that's diurnal, says and connects with Saturn. What sort of dreams do you have is the diurnal Mercury connecting to the Jupiter. How much communication, how much networking, whose name do you have to remember and get your name out there is diurnal Mercury rising before the sun. So there's a great difference between the diurnal Mercury, and I'll talk about the nocturnal in a minute. So does that make sense to talk about the fact that we straight away divide our planets from being diurnal to nocturnal? Okay, yep. Happy with those diurnals? Okay, sorry. You're not asleep yet? You're still with me?
Not at all. I'm good.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay. So what happens if the sun is below the horizon and the moon is your main luminary? So we're talking about if the sun is, and diurnal people are time conscious, what we have with nocturnal people is space conscious. You have to know the spaces around you. In other words, say you're in a foreign room, a room that you don't know, that you're not familiar with anything. You go to visit someone else and the lights go out. Immediately your arms are going to go, where am I? What can I trip over? Your feet come forward and they're hesitant. You're looking for obstacles. You can't look. That's the point. If you're in pitch darkness, you cannot look. You cannot see. So it's only through touch and feel and even instinct of what is close to you, of what is harmful and what is safe, what is sharp, what is cutting, what will hit my head, what will break my knee, all those sorts of things, is that moon worrying constantly about its environment. Because, we're used to lighting our night. We're used to having electricity. We're used to having lamps. We're used to having wood. Put us into total darkness, into a spot where there is no light, and all of a sudden we become these insecure bodies who are frightened of being hurt. That's a lunar individual. So everything is about space. Sorry, what was that?
I said vulnerability. Yeah.
Oh, hugely vulnerable, hugely sensitive, and hugely emotional. Absolutely. It brings back our night fears. It brings back our childhood fears. It brings back all those sorts of things if we're placed into a space which we are not familiar with. So you've got two planets that work as lieutenants, and they were literally called the lieutenants of the moon. And you've got Venus and you've got Mars. Now, what Venus will do is it will look for kinship to protect itself in its environment. In other words, if I'm in the room alone, then I'm the only one who can work out if it's safe or not. But if you're in the room with me, or if another person's in the room with me, Venus, then we will grab each other's hands and we will look together. We'll protect together. Venus is about finding something companionable, something friendly, something loved that will protect me as well as the moon does. So it's Venus is about, have someone got my back? Is someone protecting me? So Venus will do everything in its power to do two things: find someone to self-protect with, or do co-protection. And the other thing is to try and make the environment as comfortable as possible. Rounded edges, soft things, not sharp, hard, nasty things. That's what Venus will do, is it will try to put this moon constantly into attractive, safe environments where the moon feels comfortable, emotionally comfortable and physically comfortable. And even say, I love this space, or I love that you look after me, or I love that I feel protected. That's Venus looking after the moon. What's Mars role in here? The lord of everything sharp and pointy. Mars in a nocturnal chart is all about protection. Mars is really, well, Venus might say, I have your back. Mars goes, no, I really have your back. I will look after you. I will go into modes of protection that will mean that you will be safe, moon. And that's Mars's protective role in a nocturnal chart. There's nothing timing about this space, and that's why when we go into frightening spaces, or we go into new experiences, or we feel threatened, or we go back to almost that curling in to safety, to reduce everything until I know that I'm safe. And that's a lunar principle, is to pull in. Where the sun advances out, the moon pulls in. And that's what happens between the two of them. If your Mercury is behind the sun, and again, this is not to do with the moon, this is to do with the sun. So say, for instance, we had this situation. Say we had the sun in Leo, and behind it, rising after it, comes Mercury. And that is regardless of whether you're born in the day or the night. Both of the people we're going to talk about today, and we're going to get back to them, Kamala and Donald Trump, both of them have nocturnal Mercuries, both of them. Even though one of them is a nocturnal birth, that's Vice President Harris, or we're talking about the candidate Donald Trump, who is a diurnal birth. His chart is diurnal, hers is nocturnal. His Mercury rises after the sun. Now, what you have with the nocturnal Mercury is its role is not to serve the sun. Its role is to serve the moon. All information goes to the moon. All emotive information goes to the moon. So when you have a nocturnal Mercury, you're going to work on instinct. You're going to work on gut reaction. You're going to work on memory. And your memory is about connecting things rather than going forward and advancing like the diurnal Mercury before the sun. You are about cohesion. You're about bringing memory together, thought together, communication together. And often there's a creative sense to a nocturnal Mercury. It's often very creative artistically, musically. It loves rhythm. It loves color. All those sorts of things are part of that nocturnal Mercury symbols. Okay. You're also like to be a much more subjective thinker because you're serving the moon. Diurnal Mercury, more objective. Nocturnal Mercury, more subjective. And this comes into what we're doing today. Okay, so that took a long time to explain, but I need to do this if people are not familiar with the division between the planets. Okay, This circle on the left-hand side is all your rulerships. The first rule of essential dignity, the connection that the sun rules Leo, that Saturn rules the two signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, that Jupiter rules Pisces, that and Sagittarius, that Mars rules Scorpio and Aries, that Venus rules Taurus and it rules Libra, and that the rulerships of Mercury are the mutable signs which form a square of Gemini and Virgo. Okay, so this idea of Moonkai, and I use the term, it's spelt Manakara like this, but I like the Punjabi, it is a Punjabi word, and I like the pronunciation because I think it's a gentler, softer sound. And I even love the fact that, you know, when I write it, I incorporate a bit of the moon in here as well. So Moonkai is the way I will express it the whole time. So you take a planet, and by a planet I mean the 7 original planets. So every planet is examined in the chart from Saturn around to the moon, and every planet is looked at through the sign it's sitting in. Now, I'll do this example, and then I'm going to run back. I'm going to go back to the chart. So we have 3 planets involved in the sequence. So our first planet, say I took Jupiter. Say I took Jupiter, and that was my first planet, and I know it's diurnal. But if Jupiter is in Cancer, then it's disposited by the moon. Happy with that? So we have Jupiter, even though it's exalted, we have Jupiter, and it's disposited. Now, disposited means the planet that owns the sign of Cancer. So if I took Jupiter in Cancer and I said, okay, you're my first planet, but my second planet is the ruler of Cancer, which is the moon. So I would look at Jupiter in Cancer, notice that its dispositor was a nocturnal planet, the moon, and I might look at the moon and see it in Capricorn. Now, I then have to say, wait a minute, that moon is disposited by a diurnal planet. So I'm changing boundaries. I'm going from a diurnal planet, crossing over to a planet which is nocturnal, and then crossing over again to a planet which is diurnal. And that's what Moonkai is. The first planet, Jupiter, is in contention. That is the English translation for the word Moonkai. It's in trouble. It has this kind of feeling of, I'm in the wrong place, I'm in enemy territory, I don't know what to do, and my first response is to fight. Challenge and fight is what a planet in contention or a planet in Moonkai is going to do. And each of the planets fight in a different way. They challenge in a different way. They defend in a different way. They have an opinion in a different way. So this is very critical when I'm looking at any chart. So if I'm doing the opposite and I'm taking a nocturnal, if the planet that rules its sign is diurnal, then I've crossed one boundary. And if I then find that that planet is in the opposite or is in a sign belonging to the opposite sect, then that's going to put me into the state of Moonkai. So what does it mean? We're going to do an example in a minute, but how does it express itself? Okay. English translation is contention. So there is hostility and disharmony around this planet. There is variance, there is friction, there is rebellion. There is a judgment made either on this person around that planet or by this person around that planet. But it's also an instrument for change, for social change. I think Moonkai is a fascinating thing to say. People with Moonkai planets take us out of our comfort zone. They challenge the way we think. They challenge our opinions, because as much as contention is hostility, it's also about having a strong view, asserting something, or making a statement with force, or taking a stand. Sometimes you work as a Cassandra messenger, and that's unfortunate. The Greek mythology of Cassandra is the idea of someone who can see into the future, has the proficiency to tell the future, but is considered to be mad and crazy and can therefore runs around as a messenger saying doom and then not being taken seriously. And I've seen Moonkai planets do that too. A judgment and also an instrument for social change. So this is a planet which is Moon Kai. Right, let's use an example that's easy to see. We have Kamala, Kamala, yes, Kamala is the, is that right? I'm sorry, I'm doing Kamala. Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
Australian accents. Really sorry.
You're fine.
Hard. We have a hard accent, so it's really hard to do a softer name sometimes. Kamala. So what we have here is her chart. Now, I run through all of the planets, and we haven't got time to do all of them, but I'm going to tell you that her Mars is one that crosses boundaries. So we have her Leo Mars here, sitting in the 3rd house in Leo. Now, the ruler of Leo is her Sun. So we're crossing from the first sect A, to the second planet, which becomes, now this is because it's in Leo, that becomes the Sun. Now, the Sun is in Libra, and Libra belongs to Venus. So we have this crossover from a nocturnal planet to a diurnal planet to a nocturnal planet again. And the one who suffers for this is the first planet, which is Mars. So we have this as what I call the sequence. So her Moon Kai sequence for her Mars is Leo Mars, which is a nocturnal planet, disposited by the Sun, which is in Libra, which is diurnal, disposited by Venus, which is nocturnal. I'm not worried about what sign Venus is in. It comes into the delineation later, but doesn't affect the sequence. And what we have then is this crossover from one to the other to the other. Now, as I've put here, can you see the delineation that I've given it down the bottom here, Anne-Marie?
Yes.
So, okay, beautiful. So when you've got a Mars, obviously Mars is a fighting planet. So it kind of ups the ante on a fighting planet when you've got Mars in contention. It makes it feisty. It makes it, reactive. It makes it extra defensive. All these sorts of things. And as we've discussed between the two of us, her motto is, if we fight, we win. Like, it's literally, she uses her Mars in this campaign. It's so strong there. So you have a strong catalyst for social change. Sometimes it's born from violence, war, or disaster, but I'm not thinking it does particularly for her because this outcome planet is very important. So we're going from a Leo Mars to a Sun in Libra to Venus. And Venus is a peacekeeper. So we're not really talking about violence, war, or disaster in this outcome planet here. We're talking about connecting. We're talking about women, to be honest. That's what Kamala will fight for. I'm going to call her Vice President Harris. Okay. As I said in the class, I cannot do this. I cannot get her name right, and I do not want to be insulting. So what we have with Harris is that we have this idea that this is about fighting. This is about fighting for females, for women. Now, if I'm going to look at Mars, then I've got to say, okay, I've got a Sun in fall, and then I'm going to go to its dispositor, which is in Virgo. And this is the period, I think she's born in 1964, I'll pick it up later, but 62 or 64. This is the time when Uranus was about to come over Pluto and start a synodic cycle, which is a very, very long cycle, and went back and forward. Now, when it picks up a planet which is very important to you, then you're going to be part of this process of change. When I'm going to put Uranus and Pluto together, it's like putting a firecracker in a letterbox. It will explode, and it will cause quite a lot of damage and quite a lot of change here. It's in the sign of Virgo, so all of them disposit back to this Mercury. So I have a Mercury in Scorpio. I'll go to that in a minute, but I have this Venus, which is the last planet in this sequence. So what tends to happen in going from one to the other is these two planets become very, very important. The first planet, which is contentious, great word for it. It's looking for trouble. It's looking for battles. It's a projection for others in society for love or hate. There can be a deep rage or resentment towards something believed to be unfair or to one's disadvantage. And often there are periods of destruction, rebirth, challenges to strength, resilience, and vitality. So this is about battles. So we have this, but they're battles which are done socially, which are done much gentler than if we had a different outcome planet. And they're battles on behalf of women, and they're battles on behalf of herself as a woman. So that is really, really strong in the chart there. So that connection between the Uranus-Pluto, which is about change and pulling everybody through that change, is part of being a district attorney, part of being the first Black district attorney. It's that sense of breaking ceilings. That's how I see it. And I know Venus in Virgo is in fall, but that's part of being Venus in fall. You have to really push hard to get things that women don't normally get. So you've got this sort of sense of going from Mars to the Sun to Venus. Okay. Why is this important? Why do we care? We're going back now to Firdaria. Okay. Now, what I've done here is I have a little bit of history. I've done my homework. I've done a little bit of Kamala. This is history. Okay. So I have dates here that I want to show you why I think this is so important to use Firdaria. So, okay, we have the same chart. We have the natal chart of Placidus. I know it's taken me so long to get to these, so apologies for that. But you can't do Firdaria without looking at the chart and unpicking, particularly if you've got planets in Moon Kai. If sect is critical to Firdaria and sect is critical to Moon Kai, then surely the two go together.
Yes.
And the fact that they're even found in the same texts, there's a table of Firdaria in Al-Biruni's text. You know, there's this stuff on Moon Kai in Al-Biruni's text. I can't believe that he would not have used them together. So that's the reason for this. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we're going to talk about the fact that the one that I looked at first was the period from 1990 to 1998 is the period for the 8 years when Kamala is Deputy District Attorney. So 1990 comes in here pretty much on this Jupiter-Venus. So it comes in. Now, you'll notice here that it comes in at the end of 1989. So I count that as 1990.
Right.
So we've got the Venus active straight away. This is her appointment as the Deputy District Attorney. So we know that this Venus is working. So all of this energy of this Uranus, Pluto, Venus is working here in this Jupiter period here. And if I'm working with Venus, then I know that it's the outcome planet for Mars. So I know Mars has started to push. Okay, I've got Jupiter Mars up here in 1986 while she's studying, but I've got the actual appointment here at the outcome planet of Jupiter Venus. And then you notice that it goes into Jupiter Mercury. Why is that important? Because Mercury is disposited by this Moon Kai planet. Okay, Mercury is in Scorpio, its dispositor is Mars. Now, they're both, this is Mercury behind the sun, it's a nocturnal planet. They're both nocturnal planets, so there's no Moon Kai, but the dispositor of Mercury is Moon Kai. Also, the moon being in Aries, its dispositor is Moon Kai Mars. So I'm looking at anything to do with Mercury or the moon in any of these periods here. So we've got the whole period where she is prosecuting, where she's dealing with all sorts of things here from 1990 to 1998. You know what happens then? Mars, Venus, Firdaria. Okay, here's the moon. Oh, whoops. Oh, no, I don't want to show you that one yet. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to go back. Good. I know, lots to come, exciting stuff to come. So, okay, we have this one here, which is the Mars-Venus. So we have Mars as the large lord. This is the Moon Kai planet. From 1996 until 2003, this is all fight, fight, fight. Push forward, take challenges, be courageous, work that third house Mars, which is about really what you're doing with the third house Mars here is you're fine tuning a lot of your skills, which will be automatic to you, whether they are your communication skills, whether they are your skills in being able to move around your environment, whatever it is, you are learning and you are accumulating knowledge. We get new knowledge from the ninth house. We store it in the third house once we know exactly what we're doing. I often say, as you know, ninth house is learning to drive. It's terrifying, it's chaotic, and you're sure you're going to crash. Third house is you jumping into the car and driving somewhere and not even thinking about how you got there. Okay, that is third house. And that's what her Mars does. It gets all her experiences as a prosecutor and stores them into the third house. Absolutely
That's her
huge.
saying Kamala Harris for the people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Working as a district attorney, coming through in her becoming the district attorney in 2004. It's interesting because you've got this Mars Firdaria here. In 2004 is the changeover to Sun. This is her coming out in the sun. And this period in her sun is where she becomes district attorney in 2004. So this is her advancement for herself. And you notice that this is the dispositor for Mars. Her sun Firdaria has taken that Mars and it's worked with it so that we have all those experiences of Mars, fighting, battling, contentious, breaking new ground as a woman, as a prosecutor, all those sorts of things, and then actually taking on the office in 2004, which is a Sun Firdaria. So all those things that come in there. 2010, she is under a Sun Jupiter, and then turning into the Sun Mars is she's elected Attorney General. This period here, the Sun Mars, here's Mars coming up again, this contentious planet. Sun is the major lord, this contentious Mars is the minor lord. Are they connected? Yes, because Mars is in Leo and it's disposited by the Sun. So we know this is going to be an active period in 2012. Now, what I gather from the information is that she won a lawsuit against mortgage lenders for unfair practices. This is 2012. Now, she was encouraged to settle, and in fact, the Obama administration encouraged her to settle quickly because it was becoming a bit of a bombshell. It was a national thing, apparently, but she held out. And in 2012, she got I got to get this right, she pressed California's case and won a judgment amount which was 5 times higher than originally offered. So that's pretty good for that Sun Mars, okay? Is that push in there to actually, put these two together to work together. The other thing that happened in 2012 in this Sun Mars Firdaria was the fact that she gave a memorable address at the DNC, which raised her national profile. So this is in this 2012 was when the party started to pay attention. The party started to listen to her and think of her as a potential candidate. So that's really interesting. The Venus Firdaria in 2015. Now, 2015 is when Venus is her main lord and Mercury is her sublord. So we have Mercury coming forward, we have Venus, and we have Mercury. And she declares her intention under that period of 2015 that she would like to run for US Senate. Sorry, I'm just checking my information. She declared her candidacy under the Mercury. And in 2016, which is this one here that follows from Mercury, a combination of Mercury and the Moon, in this period here, she wins the election and took office in January 2017. So that's her getting into the Senate. Now, the other one that I want to draw attention to is this Venus-Mars. It starts in July 2019 and it goes from the middle of 2019 until August 2020. She literally, it's so interesting. pretty much in that period of time, in that July period into the August even, is she starts a campaign to be a Democratic presidential nomination. She goes for the nomination. And we've got the outcome planet as the long term, and we have the contentious planet. This one here, this one with the little bomb on it, is the Mars, and she's going to run for president. And of course, the history shows this is bad timing. This is not the right time. It's actually during this period here that she has and it literally says in the promo or the biographies, a contentious debate with Joe Biden over school busing. And I think, oh my God, that Mars is so contentious. Totally takes him on. But also in this December, which is also this period here, in December 2019, September, things, the criticism is very high. She's not suitable. She's very erratic. She's kind of not carrying herself well. She's not ready yet. So in September, it starts to become obvious that this is not going to be successful. And by December 2019, she's pulled out, and she's the first tier serious one to pull out of this presidential, going for the presidential then. August 2020, on the 15th of August 2020, Biden asks her to be his vice president. So the Venus, the sun comes through. Okay. Wow. And of course, what we've got here is the rest of her Venus up until Mercury is going to be about her as vice president. Until this period of 2024, Mercury comes in on her 57th birthday. Her Mercury in the chart is 4 degrees from the sun. It's 4 degrees from an opposition. I know it's a different sign, but it's 4 degrees. It's connected to this sun-moon opposition, very tightly connected there. So Mercury comes in, and then it starts to move through its Firdaria. Okay. Why is Mercury relevant? Why do I even care about this Moonkai? Because Mercury is disposited by this Moonkai Mars. It's about fighting. It's about if we fight, we win. That is Mercury saying if we fight, we win. And even more important is that we have our Mercury period, but the one which is current now, from the end of August 2023 until July 2025, this includes the period where Biden steps down, where she steps up in the July period of 2024, and we have the combination of Mercury and Moon. What's Moon doing in the chart? It's sitting up here, this simple. Absolutely. It is dispositing to the Mars. Both of these planets are disposited by this Moonkai Mars. Wow. Absolutely. Her energy is dynamic. It's absolutely unstoppable for 2 reasons, I think. The dispositorship of these two. Physically, she's really engaged. She's engaged in the Mercury in doing these stumps, these election promotions. They are feeding her Mercury. They are feeding her Mars. All this energy of the people, literally, Moon as the people, are feeding her energy. So when you look at these two, which are practically in opposition, they're working for each other and they're working for the Mars. Absolutely critical that this is being worked with. And the Venus, you're looking at the Mercury and you're thinking, okay, this is my Lord for 13 years. Are there any planets which are in my signs? And we have this Venus in these signs. We don't have anything in Gemini. Oh, beg your pardon. Yes, we do. We have her ascendant.
Yeah.
Ascendant. Yeah. Gee, I'm a bit slow. The ruler of her ascendant and the ruler of her IC, that is your major Lord. Absolutely incredible. The Moon rules the 2nd house, and I know that this is personal wealth, so it's not really about the wealth coming into her, but it's really interesting that there is a sextile between the Moon and Saturn is only 4 degrees away from the midheaven and is the ruler of other people's money, which is the finances coming in. So the Saturn, everybody is sending their little bit. It's not a great big, person who's got lots and lots of money. It's all individual people putting their hands in their pockets. It's Saturn. So it's just a really, really nice way to see this working for her. Any questions about the Firdaria before? Oh, and of course, she will go into a Mercury Saturn in July 2025. And Saturn is the Lord of the, Saturn sitting on the top of there and it's in rulership. Any questions about her Firdaria before I move to the next one?
Well, just about that Saturn, Firdaria, is that like because it's the ninth house? Do you see? Because I know that somebody that I watch regularly on YouTube, Susan Lin, she talks about Kamala's going to be the law and order president. Would that Saturn in the ninth house apply to that period as a president with that Mercury Saturn period? She'll be the law and order president.
Do you know what I see her as? More than the law and order president, because you've got two rulerships, and I'm going to go back to the whole sign because I can see it better. So you've got Mercury in rulership. I know it's retrograde, but it's Mercury in rulership, and it rules Capricorn and it rules Aquarius. Okay. The things that I think she will be very hot on are about protective law and protective law of women. And also, this is your social systems. Eighth house is your healthcare. Eighth house is, I think she's going to put into law things which will shore up and protect people. That's how I would read the Mercury Saturn. Putting it into law, literally saying, okay, we're going to make sure, signing off on, going back to abortion rights. That's what I see that as being, and not just, I see the Saturn as saying, look, I'm going to set them in such a way that if I lose the next election, you can't reverse them. That's what I see Saturn doing. We're not going back to that again. That whole, we're not going back. We're not going back to the whole Roe and Wade, and throwing it out. What we're going to do is we're going to lock it in. That's what I see it doing. I see her working for education. I see those two houses being ruled by Saturn, and with that on the midheaven and in the night, on the midheaven as being. But then obviously you can tell that from my conversation that I'm pretty pro Harris. So, I apologize for that as well. So you could look at it and say, oh, yes, she's going to be, all about the law and things like that. But I actually see it as being locking in Social Security, working well with the military, which is eighth house as well, like doing things in a way which is responsible. That's how I would read the Saturn to be, I really kind of like that square to Jupiter that sits there. So it says, I'm not dogmatic. I'm not, there is room for leeway with this square here. There is room to work with these things if we want to improve things and move forward. I think that's quite a positive thing to see that square between them. And the retrogradation doesn't worry me because it's often the sense of we have to go back and do it again. We have to get it better. We have to improve it. Even to the point of her, having been pressured in that whole kind of, mortgage lenders and all the rest of it and unfair practices. That retrograde Mercury just won't give in. It just won't. And so she gets the higher payment and the benefit of it. So I would be inclined to look at that as being a ninth house Saturn, which is for the future. And also ruling eighth house, shoring in expenses and shoring in, programs which help small businesses, which, help children, education, all those sorts of things. Self-right, getting your own rights, over your own body, that kind of thing, I think is important to it. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Okay.
Happy for me to move on?
Yeah. Now look at this guy.
Now look at this guy. Look at this guy. This is Moonkai Central, okay? This is just 3 planets that are all ticking bombs in this chart. This is the first planet. Okay, if I take Cancer Saturn, and I say who's its dispositor, it's in Cancer, it's in detriment, it disposits to the moon in Sagittarius. So I am going from a first planet, which is diurnal, to a second planet, which is nocturnal, to a third planet, which is Jupiter, which is diurnal. Therefore, the first planet is Moonkai, and it's in detriment, and it's sitting here, and it's ruler of the 7th house, I'm going to go to whole sign in a minute. I would say it's ruler of the 6th house, but I find that it's very interesting that it's ruler. Where's Capricorn? Capricorn's intercepted in the 5th house. So what tends to happen here is we have Leo rising here. 4th house is Scorpio. 7th house is Aquarius, and 6th house becomes Capricorn. So this changes it slightly. The moon, you don't want a planet in Moon Kai to be disposited by another planet in Moon Kai. Let me tell you, because you are both erratic. You are both unpredictable. Saturn in Cancer, really, if I'm talking about detriment, I'm talking about a planet which is supposed to put lines in the sand and say, I do not cross them. But when you put Saturn in Cancer, it says, I don't cross them when I feel like it, but when I do feel like it, I do cross them. That's the problem of putting Saturn in Cancer, is it becomes an emotional decision for a planet which should be objective. And that to me is the problem with any, but particularly if you start talking about Moon Kai, these are the problems of Moon Kai Saturn in Cancer. And then its dispositor is Jupiter. Its outcome planet is Jupiter. So what you get is an outcome planet which is excessive, which is extreme, which makes its own rules for Saturn. All that sort of stuff is potentially there. But it's the reason, all three of these contentious planets are the reasons that this was your 46th president, because these were planets that ignited people. People were sick of authority. People wanted change, from what I can gather. I'm only watching it from outside. People were emotive. People loved what he said, all that sort of energy of being a rat bag in the Saturn was something that really engaged people and really got them, really worked up in those first rallies, in those first years, in that kind of period, in the 2014 and 2015, when people were really razzed up to vote for him and bring him in 2016, you see these three planets working. Saturn sits in the chart. Here's Saturn. It's conjunct the Lord of the midheaven. Now, Venus isn't Moon Kai because it's a nocturnal planet, and it's disposited. It's still disposited like the Saturn is by the moon, but it's nocturnal to nocturnal. It's the Saturn being diurnal that makes it Moon Kai. So we have the ruler of the 7th house, his allies or his enemies, conjunct the ruler of his midheaven. So this is about engaging that Saturn to get what you want from that Venus. That's really strong there. The moon is Moon Kai. It's on the south node because it goes from Sagittarius moon to Jupiter, its dispositor. Jupiter's in Libra in the chart, which goes to Venus. So we have Venus involved in the moon's Moon Kai thing. Again, the popular people, the people who feel disenfranchised, all that sort of stuff ends up being the outcome planet, which is Venus, and Venus is the ruler of the midheaven. After he got in, sort of, because I've been working with this for a few years, and I went, how did that happen? I kind of looked at this and went, I can see it. I can see why he was a breath of fresh air. He was a rebel. He was as I've said before, I come from Australia. We're built on rat bags. We're a nation built on rebellion and anti-establishment and anti-Saturn principles. We get it. But yeah, this is a real kind of going to Jupiter and then going to the Venus is not good. And then we have, now remember that there's only 5 degrees between the Mars that we looked at before, 21 degrees of Leo in Kamala's Mars and 26 degrees of Leo. So what happens is that the Mars the Mars in Leo disposits to the sun, but it's a different sun. This sun isn't Libra, this sun is Gemini, which then disposits to Mercury because Mercury is behind the sun. I guess I just get so excited I can't talk about it. So I'm just going to pause and go slower, okay? So this is a Mars which has an outcome of Mercury. Both these planets are nocturnal. Mars is nocturnal, Mercury is nocturnal. So when Mercury when Mars is agitated, Mercury reacts. So we get this speech, which is nasty. Sorry, I'm not a Trump follower. It is personal. It is Mercury in Cancer, and it can't let go of Donald Trump won't ever get over the fact that he couldn't. He was convinced he could beat Biden. His Mercury was convinced he could beat Biden. He will never get over the fact that his enemy changed. His whole strategy from 2020, particularly from 2022, when he announced that he was going to run again for his second term, from 2022, his whole mindset, all of his people were geared towards beating Biden, building up against Biden. What happened in July, the end of July, with Biden stepping down and Harris stepping forward, destroyed his Mars and turned it from a fighter into a defensive action. And that's when you really start to see him disintegrate. That is disintegration of this guy. As I would read it for these moon guide planets, if I was just using this model, that's what I would say, is that Mars stopped being a warrior and became vindictive, became caught in past, kept talking. He still talks about Biden, kept trying to find a name for Harris that would diminish her, kept digging up, trying to dig something up on her and her walls, her vice president, but there's no dirt there. There's no dirt like there is for him. So when I look at his 3 planets and I look at these 3 planets in Moonkai, I have Saturn in Moonkai, which challenges, it's got a challenging attitude to authority, a heightened distrust of those in power or with power or influence, a perceived attacks or genuine attacks on the individual's opinions, their integrity, their reputation. This is all Saturn in Moonkai. This is all this guy here that goes to the moon and goes to Jupiter. Sensitivity to being in control or being controlled by other people's actions or decisions. Boundaries can be inflexible or non-negotiable or not there at all. That's the other side of Saturn in Moonkai. Feeling affronted when others don't acknowledge their power or control. Then we have Moon. Highly sensitive, very private, self-protective individual. Challenges in maintaining physical strength or mobility, that's the body. Health or immune system challenges. Heightened fears of separation, alienation or betrayal by loved ones. Strong statement on mother and may describe difficulties in mother's life situation. This is sensitivity of the moon, emotionality. And it's disposited by Jupiter, which winds it up more. And then it goes to Venus. And this tells you this tells me how he feels about women. The 2 things together is this sense of, and I don't, I've looked up his relationship with his mother. There's not a lot about it, but she seems to continually cave in to his father, Fred. I think there's talk about depression. There's talk about, periods where she was removed from the family, either voluntarily or by force. But this sense of being overcome by males is part of this Venus stuff. And even this moon overrides women's authority over their own body. I can have whatever woman I want, all that stuff that, he's in court for and he's in trouble for and all the rest of it.
When you're a star, you can do whatever you want.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can walk into the back part of the Miss Universe and, they've all got no clothes on, but I own it. It's a combination of Saturn and the moon, to be honest. It's both of them. And they are connected because Saturn is disposited by this moon. So Saturn says, well, if I buy something, I own it. If I throw enough money at it, I own it, that sort of thing. And then you've got the Mars, which ends up in the Mercury. And I've just reprinted revisited what I did for Kamala. I see her Mars because I am pro-Harris. I see it as a battle and a courageous statement. Even though it disposits to a Venus and even though, the Mars in Leo for her goes to a Sun in fall and then a Venus in fall, I think that's talking about the potential for the first woman gender. I mean, you've never had a woman as a president before. and her racial background. That's what I think is what it talks about, is this woman, for all intents and purposes, should not be standing there as the President of the United States, but she is.
She
And I
is.
think that is such a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Okay, this is his Firdaria. I know we've gone a long time. Am I still okay to do this, Anne-Marie?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. If you're okay, I'm okay.
I can stop there and go, and his Firdaria. Oh, we've run out of time. Sorry. This is a different order. Okay, this is a different order because it starts with the fact that he is a sun birth. Here's his sun in the 10th house, but honestly, once it goes from anywhere from 7 to 12 houses, it's a diurnal chart. So here is his sun highly elevated in his Placidus chart, dropping to the 11th house. It's a pretty fortunate sun, to be honest. It's sitting there with the North Node, which gives more power to it. Even the Uranus doesn't hurt it because it's a very unusual thing, and Uranus tends to add energy to the sun. So there's nothing damaging in this sun Firdaria that we can see. Okay, so the first 10 years of life is learning off Fred. Absolutely, learning how to be a mini-me Fred, copying what he does, copying his speech, copying his opinions. But you notice in this whole sign, the dispositor of all of this stuff goes into the 12th house. It gets darker. It goes from the 11th house in Placidus to this 12th house, to now feeling insecure, feeling like he can't impress his father, feeling like he's invisible, all those sorts of things. And this Mercury disposited by the moon, which is Moon Kai. And this moon opposite the sun, and the moon damaging the sun, to be honest, from that point right in those 10 years. This is a very, very emotional, needy, like I kind of look at that and I kind of feel sorry for little Donald. I think that moon doesn't get a lot of love, doesn't get a lot of care, doesn't get a lot of attention, and all this thing is about impressing father and being a little mini-me of father. I think that's part of it. So that's there. It goes into Venus from the ages of 10 to 18. So Venus in his chart is conjunct his Saturn. Now, from the ages of 10 to 18, Venus is affected by Moon Kai planet. That's the Saturn in Cancer, disposited by the moon, that goes back to the Jupiter. There's 2 degrees between them. So when I'm talking about Venus, I'm talking about particularly a 12th house Venus. It drops from 11 to 12 in whole sign. I'm talking about it as the ruler of the midheaven. So still that sense of desiring to please. I think that's a strong statement about desiring to please. And remember that even though I didn't put it in this previous stuff here, Moon Kai Saturn is also father. Don't forget that this is father's statement. This is Fred. This is his father's statement as well. So all that wanting to gain attention and all that desire in those years here of 10 to 18, I think in many ways are also lessons about how not to treat women. I really do. I think it comes from that place there of, first crushes, first girls, but even reinforcing the whole sort of Saturn thing that they're there to be used. They're there to be abused, that kind of stuff. I think is because that Saturn is in detriment and it's disposited by a Moon Kai moon. He doesn't quite know anything, any kind of love he has for someone is likely to bring the Saturn with it, the 7th house ruler. And if it brings the Saturn, it brings the feeling of rejection.
Wow.
That Moon Kai moon is about I'm being rejected. I'm not loved, I'm all that sort of stuff of nobody loves me, nobody cares about me. All that gets reinforced in that Venus period there. So it builds a story. You're then moving on to Mercury between the ages of 18 and 31. And we're talking about Mercury now, disposited by the moon and the 3rd planet in this Mars Moon Kai. Mars in Leo goes to the sun, goes to Mercury. So these periods of 18 to 31 are again about trying to impress father. You see it over and over again. Mars Firdaria, 31 to 40. Saturn Firdaria, 40 to 51. Jupiter Firdaria, 51 to 63. Then the Mars, there's a planet. This Mars is in Moon Kai, this Saturn is in Moon Kai, this moon is in Moon Kai.
Yeah.
There's just this tumultuous, chaotic, challenging kind of statements going on over and over again. And of course, what happens is you then have 5 years of the node and you go back to the sun again from the age of 75. So with that in mind, this is our history lesson on this guy. Okay, right. Now, where did I start? Okay, I started with, I'm going to start with 1973. So 1973, now remember that this is Mercury. Mercury is the Lord from 18 to 31. In 1973, which is a period of, here it is here, September 1973, Mercury and the Sun, father and son, this is Fred and Donald, were sued by the US Justice Department for violating the Fair Housing Act. So this is a Sun, Mercury, Sun Firdaria. Is Mercury corrupted by Mars? Yes, it is. This Mars is in play. Remember, these are the two planets in Mars's Firdaria. There's Mercury, which is outcome, because we're going from Mars to the Sun in Gemini to Mercury. What's going on here in the Mercury Sun Firdaria? Both him and his father, his namesake, are sued by the US Justice Department for violating the Fair Housing Act and the operation of 39 apartment buildings in New York City. So they were substandard, they were throwing tenants out, raising the rent radically, like all the tricks of the trade, okay? Now, the other thing is what the Trumps did, and this is where I think the Mercury Sun comes in so strongly. Remember, we're talking about Mercury in Cancer, disposited by the Moon. We're talking about the Sun in Gemini, disposited by the Mercury. What they did and turned around and did was they countersued the Justice Department for $100 million, alleging harm to their reputations. Now, that dragged on for 2 years, and the only way that the US Justice Department kind of really got out of it was that the suit was settled 2 years later in 1975 under the Venus, under the agreement that it did not require the Trumps to plead guilty. This is past history, right back in 1973.
Wow.
You wonder about this Sun Firdaria. Sometimes when you look at this and you think, oh, what's this going to be? Look back. Look back to your other sun periods. Look back to your other sun periods here, and find out what was going on there. And this is where this is the seed of what's happening now, 1973 from that Firdaria. So you kind of go, wow, that becomes really fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, under the Moon Firdaria, what happened in the Moon Firdaria? Oh, okay. In the Moon Firdaria here, this period here from 1977 till Saturn, what happens here is now the moon is in contention, okay? Trump sets up all these different things. He comes out of this period here of apartments and starts to go into luxury things. Luxury, this is like the big end of town. Now, all of this, sorry?
Shiny things.
Yes, shiny things, absolutely shiny. All of it is bankrolled by his father. Oh. So even though there's opposition between the moon and the sun, he's still under father's shadow. There are gifts, there are contracts, there are loans, he's heavily banked. All his businesses are heavily banked by father, and they start to build. And what he does is in his moon period, is he starts to overextend himself. He starts to, put out all this sort of money and all this cash based on that, so that when he hits his Saturn period, he crashes and burns. Okay. Under his Saturn Firdaria, he has cases of bankruptcy, particularly this one here in 1990, Saturn Mars is his first bankruptcy. So there you have two planets in Moon Kai, side by side. Okay. So Saturn in Cancer, Mars in Leo, Saturn dispositing to the moon. So in many ways, the Saturn Firdaria takes all the things that the moon builds up, which is build, and it crashes in Saturn. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting about 1992 was when he was really in bankruptcy and he's trying to save himself. 1994, he's in trouble. He's barely got any money, but he's got enough money in his Saturn moon Firdaria, again, both of his moon Kai planets. Do you know what he does in 1995? He partners with NBC to purchase the Miss Universe organization. He's got enough money for that, So yeah, it's the moon and the Saturn moon. I walk in there and they're mine. I've bought these women.
Yeah, I'm going to go in there and I can see whatever I want.
Absolutely. And no one can stop me. Absolutely. No one can stop me. The moon disposits to Jupiter, which disposits to Venus. All that stuff there. Okay, and in the Jupiter Firdaria, you'll love this one. In the Jupiter Firdaria, it starts to pick up, and the reason it picks up is because for 16 years, he takes on The Apprentice. Do you know he had that show for 16 years? It pulled in $200 million, and it bankrolled him again in his Jupiter Firdaria. So does this work? You bet it does. He still went bankrupt a couple of times, but and I think he actually went bankrupt. No, the next one is the Mars Firdaria 2009. This is the bankruptcy of a couple of his entertainment businesses and the start of the fall of the casino in 2009. So you start to see these rises and falls and rises and falls from these planets here. Okay, now we've come to the nodal axis. Right. 2016. This is the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Bingo. Okay. So yeah, okay, no.
But it's also the presidency.
And it's also the presidency. Yes, if you want to look at that, it's also the presidency. Absolutely. 2016. Why? Because it's conjunct this sun here. And it's so powerful. It's a diurnal chart coming into power. 10th house in Placidus, 11th house here. It's coming into power and it's really pushing. Now, so the first couple of years, okay, are pretty okay because the idea is North Node is a benefic. You get benefit from the North Node. And anything connected to the North Node is going to bring benefit. There are still wavy things. It's for 3 years. Because remember, this North Node is also opposite the moon, which is moon Kai. Right. So, it's not just the sun. It's still also tarnished. Exactly. It's still tarnished. He's still doing things, but he's giving grants. He's giving money. He's doing all the sorts of things that look like he's going to be able to hold it. Along comes the South Node and along comes COVID. Yeah. And things start to crumble. The economy goes down. You get these really weird statements about COVID. You get their mismanagement. You get even to the point with the South Node that came out recently that he sent tests over to Putin, bless his little cotton socks, Right? But instead of that moon Kai moon looking after his people, he's looking after his alliances. And, absolutely. You'll notice that, when I talk about whole sign, that moon is goes from the 4th to the 5th, and it rules the 12th house. So it's all that hidden business stuff.
Behind the scenes stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that movement into the 5th house is his support of Wade and Roe.
Roe v. Wade.
House, you notice it goes to the 5th house of, these sort of things. And you go, okay, that moon is in 5th house, literally. We need more children. Disposits to the Jupiter, which disposits to the Venus. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take away women's rights. It's literal. It is absolutely so strong there. And that is in the South Node period. And it's going to accentuate the moon because the moon is on the South Node. To the period of 75 where the sun comes in. Now, in 2022, apparently, 2019 was his first impeachment for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress in connection with the Ukraine scandal. I'm going to go this way. So this is the South Node starting to go bad with the moon. So we have the first impeachment, We have the second impeachment in 2021 for incitement of insurrection, and both impeachments ended in his acquittal by the US Senate. So that sun and moon are very, 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 very powerful when you're talking about them in the chart. Where he is now, on the 30th of May, 2022. So, okay, we have the sun coming in 2021. We have his announcement that he's going to do a second term. We have the re-election, running for re-election, the second term, May the 30th, 2024. Now, you'll notice here that his sun Mercury comes in April, okay? Mm-hmm. On the 15th of April, the proceedings begin against him. I love that. So yes. Mercury starts to be important because Mercury, to me, is 12th house. It is the third one of Mars. So Mars goes to the sun and to Mercury, and it's a dispositor of his sun. Mercury is there to bolster him initially in April. In April, he thought he had it. In April, he thought he was going to win. He thought he was going to put himself back there. And I think what he's found is that it's not going to happen. So we have in May, he actually is convicted. He becomes the first former president to be convicted of a crime, 34 felonies the month after this comes in. So we have Mercury being the representative for the sun. And the Mercury isn't fabulous. It's disposited by the moon. The sun is going to really be beleaguered by the moon and by this Mercury disposited by the moon there, or in connection to the moon there. So you've got all of those sorts of things coming into there. I did pull up the solar returns, but do you want to finish there? Do you want to have the solar returns?
How are you doing on time? Are you okay?
No, I'm fine. I know this is a long podcast and, that might be a problem for you. But you've already seen what I've just put up, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, and one thing I wanted to say, I thought of the reason why, like the difference between his Moon Kai Mars and her Moon Kai Mars is that he has a diurnal chart and she has a nocturnal chart. And so Mars is the malefic contra sect to him. So that makes it more malefic in his chart.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if you, exactly. And even if you use this as Mars above the horizon, then it's in trouble. Yeah. It's in a diurnal chart. It's in the same hemisphere with the sun, and it's in a masculine sign.
Yeah.
Mars in a diurnal chart is an attacking Mars. And I think the fact that it goes to Mercury at the end is a real problem for him because, I'm sorry, he can't follow the program. Like his Saturn won't follow what his advisors tell him to do because, he won't do it. His moon won't allow him to follow the program because he's so emotional. And his Mercury is disposited by this moon. He is going to talk about his wounding and his hurt and, and how he's been hard done by. All those sorts of things are going to be his Mercury Firdaria, and nonsensical stuff.
Right. Ridiculous. Yeah.
Absolutely. And whether, he's entering the first stages of dementia or not, it's not great to see your Mercury disposited by a planet and moon Kai and sitting in the 12th house.
No.
It's just not good. And the dispositor of your sun, it's not a good look. It's just not a good look.
Well, let's take a quick look at the solar returns. Let's just real quick.
Yeah, even Mercury ruling the second house isn't great, because you're trying to build up. Okay, this is interesting because if you're using perfections, you're counting around from the first house, around and around the circle every 12 years. I love this opposition straight away between these two. They're at odds with each other. He's 78. He's been in a seventh house year, so everything seventh house is important to him since June. Is that his birthday? Since June, when the sun's in Gemini. Kamala Harris has just turned 60 on the 20th of October. They are locked across the wheel of someone going into their first house against someone going in their seventh house. And that's why I just went, oh my God, I had to show you that because it's such an interesting statement. They are battling it out.
Definitely.
Battling it out.
Battle for the ages.
Absolutely. This is Donald Trump's chart. Now, a reminder to you, his Mars is Moon Kai, his Saturn is Moon Kai, and his Moon is Moon Kai. This is the Placidus chart. This is the whole sign chart. And I've just put them on the whole sign to show you these Moon Kai planets. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, he has a 7th house year from June this year. It's 7th house. Who's in charge of the year? His Moon Kai Saturn. And it's in detriment. So he has this birthday in June, and his friends, his allies, start gathering behind him, Saturn, and saying, we'll support you financially, we'll look after you, we'll give you a plan called Project 25, we'll provide all these Mercury things for you, Saturn things for you, that you put into place, and all you have to do is run for president. So we have your most important planet for the year being Saturn. It's conjunct the ruler of your midheaven. Do as you're told, and we'll get there. Is this guy going to do as he's told?
Never.
He does up until the debate with Biden, and then the wheels came off. Absolutely. So when I look at his solar return and I go, okay, I have the solar return here. I have what I think is important to me is the fact that this is the midheaven. This is returning the sun back to its placement at 2255 Gemini. It's disposited as it will be by Mercury. Now, when I first looked at this in June and July, I kind of went, oh my God, I think he's going to do it. Because the ruler of his sun, the Venus is in there, the ruler is there. Mercury has gone from being in Cancer to being in Gemini. But I've started to think, okay, they're in the 12th house, so maybe this might, be a good thing. In the weakest house, you do not want your solar return to have your sun in the 12th house, even though its dispositor is stronger. This midheaven is square the sun and all this energy in Gemini, and it's 23 degrees of Pisces. And Saturn, the Lord of the year, is 4 degrees from the midheaven. And once more is the ruler of the 7th house, which is your important house. So I remember opening this solar return and closing it up and going, oh no.
Oh no.
Poor America. Is America going to be okay? Is America going to be okay? And two other things. Okay, so we have the planet of contention on the midheaven and the Lord of the year, which could actually get you there. We have it still ruling the 7th house. I think this is Elon Musk. I think this is all the power and the money coming through there, because we've got a change in who is financially supporting him. In this chart, Jupiter rules the 8th house, so that's your financial backers. But in this one, it's Saturn again. So, and Pluto's sitting in there with all this power, like the richest man in the world is backing you, this Pluto. Yeah. And it squares Mars, which is your your Moon Kai planet. So when I first looked at this, I went, there's Mars engaged with Pluto by square. There's Saturn on the midheaven. There's the luminaries and the Lord of the luminary in square to the midheaven and in square to Saturn. Okay, and the other one here is the other Moon Kai planet. It's 5 degrees from Saturn, but it's the moon. Those are his 3 planets, and they're all engaged in the chart. It's a bit far, but it's a sextile to the ascendant, and it rules the ascendant. So in June, he had it. He absolutely had it, Anne-Marie. There's no doubt in my mind that he was just going to steamroll over Biden, and just that would be it. That would be it. The nodes are square the ascendant. They're 12 degrees of Aries and Libra, and they square 14 degrees of this ascendant. The sextile to the Lord of the year. The moon even in Virgo, disposited by, the Firdaria Lord, the two sitting together with a degree. It was like, oh, wow, we all have to get ready. And this is, I think, I look at this solar return, I think, I know why it's neck and neck. I understand the neck and neck stuff. And I put the midheaven in here, which is 23 degrees of Pisces, which is a square to his nodes and a square to his sun and moon. You know where it is? It's in his 8th house. 2 assassination attempts.
Wow.
Yeah, you look at it and you just go, oh, this is the story of Donald Trump. But it's starting to unravel. And the reason I say, and now do you want any questions about the soul return?
Mm.
Happy with that?
I want to hear how it's unraveling.
I think the 12th houseness is getting to him. I
Yeah.
think that the Pluto Mars is not turning into something which is pleasant for him or is financially beneficial. I now start to see these Saturn energies as the Republicans, the important Republicans moving over, the
Mm.
Liz Cheneys, the military, all those who are actually saying, we are Republicans and we cannot vote for this man. We will put aside our ideologies. We'll put aside what we would normally, lifelong allegiances, lifelong loyalties to stop this person. That's who I think the Pluto's becoming for this Mars. Um, and that's to me, even Fox is turning on them. You start to see more and more kind of panelists, talking, being allowed to speak now,
Yeah.
instead of being, kind of totally crashed out. I still think you have the Mercury working in the sense that, there are two versions of how he's reported, you know,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
but I think what's really rising and what's really important is that maybe this moon kind moon represents the fact that people are going to podcasts. They're going everywhere but mainstream news services now to get information. Now,
Yeah.
that information may be to support their opinions, but for independent voters or people thinking to change their minds, this is the moon disposited by the Mercury. It's that third house sense of going somewhere, the Midas touch, or to Dave Parkman, or I mean, look at me. I know these names to Brian Cohen because I live in another country and I've been going there
Yeah.
to find out how this is going to turn out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the Moonkai moon that it will eventually. It's not Moonkai in the chart, neither is Mars, neither is Saturn. None of these planets are Moonkai in this solar return, but they are originally his Moonkai planets. So that's why I looked at them.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what's unraveling for him is that this eighth and seventh and the eighth house ruled Saturn, which was so powerful, the Elon Musk and all the rest of it, having the police departments behind him, but now individual ones turning against him, having the unions against him. All this sort of stuff is now starting to mean that Pluto in some way is overpowering the Mars.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's an overcoming square, isn't it? Because Pluto's,
Yes, yeah, Pluto would rise before Mars. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So initially I just saw it as all the money and all the power and, how do we stop all this? They're just going to keep throwing this at, the PAC group,
mm,
or MAGA groups or whatever. But even, I think, yeah, I think it's real. And even some of his religious groups are starting to turn against him. Even, he had the backing of some pretty fundamentalist churches, and I think that Saturn in the ninth house is starting to say this guy's crooked, this guy's disgusting, this guy
right.
is morally corrupt. They're
Yeah.
turning to yeah, fundamentalists for Harris. There's a whole group of them. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on there. Two, well, Harris's soul return. Okay. What I think is important in this one here. So here's her natal stuff. Here's her moon kind Mars that we've talked about. Here's her moon up here. Remember that she's in a Mercury Firdaria and that the moon is representative for the Mercury in this year. Okay. This is the whole sign chart here, just shifting the moon, but it doesn't really shift. The Mercury does go into the sixth house, and that's probably the most important thing. Okay. I have put this cross here. 27 degrees of Aries is the moon, 27 degrees of Libra is the sun. This Mars is 24 degrees of Cancer. The
Mm,
Pluto is 29 degrees of Capricorn. This is the axis of this opposition. So in this solar return, the 24 degrees of Cancer is down here, and the 29 degrees of Pluto is up here. It's firing off this sun and this moon, and the moon,
Wow.
which is the moon Kai law. Yeah, I started to go, okay, maybe this is okay. And of course, it's reflective in the solar return because the sun's not going to change
Right.
position. So
Yeah.
what you've got in effect is you've got um, this. That Mars is engaged here and engaged with the Pluto, and this to me is her starting to change her power base, and people have gone since her birthday. People have started to early vote, I believe.
Yes. I
Is that
voted.
correct?
Yeah, I voted. Yeah. We've had our votes. Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing, I'm trying to get in color here. The other thing is that here is her moon, which is square Saturn, sorry, which is
Mm.
on the midheaven.
Oh, wow.
Okay, now her moon is, I'll take that off again in case I accidentally do that. Okay. Okay, sorry, if I draw on it, I won't mean to from here. Okay,
All good.
so we have a Saturn moon square. Okay, now I don't mind a Saturn moon square if I want that Saturn to be working for me to manifest something. The Saturn is connected to the midheaven, which is
Mhm.
16 degrees of Virgo. The moon is in Gemini, which is disposited by the Firdaria Lord. So that's good. Both of their moons, Trump and they both have a mercurial feel about them because they have to be. They are both going for president. So for Trump, it's Sun Mercury. For Harris, it's Mercury Moon. So they're both very mercurial at the moment, and that makes sense with all their contacts and their nodal stuff and all the rest of it. So we
Wow.
have the whole idea that we have the moon, we have her house here, which is her perfected house, which is the first house. The Mercury, the Venus is actually moon Kai in this chart. So I'll show you. So we have Mercury at 3 degrees of Sag. It will disposit to Jupiter, which is across the other side of the chart in Gemini. So we've gone from nocturnal Venus to diurnal planet Jupiter. Jupiter is in detriment, and it's disposited by Mercury, which again is behind the Sun. We've got the Sun in Libra and the Mercury in Scorpio. So we have Venus, which is Moon Kai conjunct the ascendant. Now, I
Wow.
don't mind that because it means she's a fighting female. And
Yes.
I think, wow. I know there's a big gap between 3 degrees and the moon here, but I quite like that as well. So I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, and the thing that absolutely swayed me in the end was this midheaven at 16 degrees of Virgo. Have a look at her Pluto and her Venus here down here. Her
Oh,
Venus, which
wow.
fights, Pluto is 15 Virgo.
Yeah.
Venus is 17 Virgo. The midheaven is 16 Virgo. It's right on top of that little stellium between the Pluto and the Venus. So will she do it? I think she will. I hope she will. I'll be very sad astrologically if she doesn't. And that's my
It was
presentation.
fabulous. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I mean, she has to win. She just has to. Um,
Yeah, you would
so
hope so, wouldn't you? You would hope so.
yes.
Sorry, I will take my share screen, because I've totally lost my screen. So
There we
yeah,
go.
that's Daria, and yeah, so I
Uh,
went longer than I meant to. I'm really sorry, but I
no,
really
no,
want to
no,
throw out
that's
the
perfect.
terms at the end. So
I
yeah,
might
yeah.
chop it into some parts, like, and
You-
chapters, or I might just
yeah,
post it all because this is like everyone needs to watch this. I just think this is just you put so much effort into it, and it's just so um helpful, and what a great learning tool. So thank
yeah.
you so much
Yeah,
for
with
this.
the premise that it's not unbiased. Sorry, Anne-Marie.
Oh,
I couldn't do it unbiased. Sorry, what?
no, that's
But
all right. That's fine with me. I'm pretty, I say what I'm feeling too. I'm very,
yeah,
so
yeah.
people
So
know where I stand.
some people are gonna hate it, and some people are think, yeah, okay, but you could see the Fidarios working. I just think, wow, they work. They're
It's
fantastic.
really incredible. And I do think that the Moonkai Mars, both of them having the Moonkai Mars, and because of one's a diurnal and one's a nocturnal, I think that that's sways that you can see the difference in the fight.
Yeah,
Who's fighting
absolutely.
for the right and who's fighting for themselves.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. And that Mars is fighting to keep him out of prison. That's exactly what it's
yeah,
doing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And he's angry. He's angry because he didn't get what he thought he would get, which was Biden.
right.
Uh, he's got someone who is, yeah, he's going to win. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do
Thank
that. That
you,
was so much
Joy.
fun to
Oh
do. That
yeah,
was
so
great.
good. And I will send you the link when I get it up and everything, so you can share
That'd
it
be
too.
great. That'd be great.
Okay,
I might send it around a few places myself,
good.
particularly, it
Yeah.
might look honestly, but if it just helps, that's brilliant. So yeah.
Okay. Fabulous. Well, thank you so
Thank you so
much. And you
much.
enjoy
Hello,
your
puppy.
days alone and doing your own thing.
Thank you very much. And hello to your puppy.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Anne Marie. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.